The Texas Pacific Land Trust TPL update. So since the last episode, and this is really playing out like a high drama soap opera, as we'll see after this technical review, we were waiting for the buy setup perfections to print, and they did. That's from this buy setup completion where price had to tick lower than bars 7 and 6, and it could have happened either on 8 or 9, and it didn't happen. So eventually it did, and sure enough it took off. So there was a lot of heavy hitters looking for that. And the range is set by this buy TDST up here and this sell TDST down here. So this sell TDST originated from the true low of this sell setup sequence up here to the 9 perfected. So you can see it's at the bar before the 1 bar at that close down there, which is the true low. Then it went on a downside run and printed the 9s here, and we got the buy setup TDST up here, and that's based at this true high over here for bar 1. And it's been a long time since the start of that run, August 31st, so all of September and half of October. So price has yet to get above the buy TDST and below the sell TDST and get those qualified and confirmed. If that happens up here at the buy TDST, that's a high probability and higher odds of more upside price action to ensue. And you can see when this buy setup 9 end count was printed, it ceased these sell risk levels from moving any further following price. So those ended, and now there's a new one here, this phantom sequential disqualified sell risk, and that's a lesser 13 that was derived from this, and we're looking for combo and sequential, not these other ones like phantom and variable, but nonetheless they are resistance levels and levels to get above to qualify and confirm for more upside. So this sell setup is going on a nice run and could quite possibly print the sell setup 9 end count just like back here, and then there will be a higher floor if that happens, and that would be at this low here if it happens. So if it starts approaching this buy TDST and has not printed the sell setup 9 end count, I would start looking for some downside price action. But with the announcement of Exxon taking over Pioneer in the Permian Basin, this could just as well bust out of here and get qualified and confirmed. All of these levels, we'll have to see what happens up here. I don't know if it's a slam dunk with all the regulators and those powers to be. We'll just have to see what happens up here. So if that 9 end count doesn't print and it can't get above this buy TDST, I would look for visiting this sell TDST down here. And now I'm going to run through an article in Seeking Alpha, a real good writer, real knowledgeable young guy that knows about this ongoing drama with TPL. And he states, as you'll see, that this is actually the fair value for this. We actually got into it down here and that's a different story, but this would be a good place to buy if it visited this and didn't go under here. So here's the URL for this article. You can try typing that into your URL bar up there, or just follow along with me as I'm going to go through this as quick as I can, and it will probably take about 10 minutes. So you can see this person, Thomas Reba, he thinks that the fair value is 1433. So that's right around that cell TDST at the bottom. And you can see his headline here, the TPL's management issues coming to an end. So there's really no decision yet out of that Delaware court, but I'll run through this as quick as I can. And here's the company background. It started as the T&P Railway back in the 1800s until they discovered oil in the 1920s. And look at that, they had 3.5 million acres of land associated with the old T&P Railway, and it was put into a trust for the benefit of the bondholders, the original investors in the railroad. And the trust's mission was to generate revenues through the oil and gas royalties, but through the decades, they actually jettisoned 75% of the acreage since 1888, and returning free cash flow to owners through dividends and buybacks. And there wasn't much happening through the 70s, through 2010, and then fracking came onto the scene and gave this a shot in the arm. And they went from producing 1.7 thousand barrels a day up to 24,000 barrels a day. So what's left of the land, they own 886,000 surface acres. And over and above that, they have 460,000 acres of land that they collect royalties on from the oil and gas. So here's the high drama, and boy, if you read this and get to understand it, you really hear that soap opera high drama organ that I play sometimes. I'll spare everybody that. So basically, there were 3 old trustees managing the trust, and one of the long-timers, when he was 83, he resigned, and the other 2 old-timers that were left in the trust tried to bring in someone from the Air Force, a general who had no knowledge of oil and gas, while this investor group, Horizon Kinetics and Soft Vest, where this fella came from, Eric Oliver, so Horizon Kinetics and the investor group put Eric Oliver into the position, and then the 2 remaining trustees and that investors group battled through proxy statements, and those 2 said that Mr. Oliver from SoftVest failed to disclose his background information and conflicts of interest. And at that time, those 2 old-timers had 1,300 shares between them, and this guy Oliver from the investors group had 130,000 shares. And I did the math on the calculator, calculating $2,000 a share, so he owned $260 million worth of TPL. So then the investor group filed a motion saying that one of those old-timers on the trust was not validly elected back in 2017. So those 2 dropped that, and then after that included 3 new board members on TPL's Conversion Exploration Committee to convert to a C Corp, which they did in 2020, and I didn't know that, so it is a C Corp. And then they split the 9 board members into 3 groups, really kind of odd. And some kind of clauses in there and extras, they can only be dismissed for cause. And if they did, they could still serve even if they didn't get the necessary votes. That's really kind of insane. And the agreement also limited Horizon Kinetics to owning no more than 23.5% ownership of the TPL, it's a Horizon Cap, and Soft Vest to owning 4%. That's that guy Oliver, Soft Vest. And as the author points out, finally, and this is the point that triggered the current lawsuit, is the voting commitment. So there's a clause which states that the investor group shall vote in accordance with the board's recommendations, but there's a following exception, and you can read it, but basically the big item in there is things related to an extraordinary transaction, so they don't have to vote on it if they consider it a extraordinary transaction. So that means with the board's newfound corporation power that they wanted to increase the number of shares, and they called it Proposal 4. So this was considered an unconventional proposition since the foundation has been receiving significant free cash flows and returning it to shareholders. And Horizon and SoftVest considered it an extraordinary transaction that changed the dynamics of the business. And they wanted to split this, management did, when it was $2,700. And you can see that we've pointed out many times that precipitous drop from up there down to where we got in around $1,280. And the management didn't disclose really any information about the acquisitions and proposed to increase the number of shares from 7.75 million, I guess that is, to 46.53 million in a 3-to-1 stock split. And that would have increased it by 23.4 million shares and would have amounted at this price to over $15 billion of issuance. And the investors, SoftVest and Horizon Kinetics, said it would dilute ownership, creating an incentive for managers with no experience in the game. And that plays against shareholder value creation because of their compensation structure. So they were out to make billions. And here's the guidelines for executive compensation. We'll move on here. So they tried to convince shareholders, this is management, to support that proposal. While the biggest shareholders were announcing the days before the meeting, they were voting against and encouraging shareholders to do so. And the writing was on the wall. I mean, that guy had 130,000 shares, while those 2 trustees only had 1,300 between them. So that wasn't going to succeed. So the management adjourned the meeting, annual meeting, and then that's when the legal fight between management and Horizon Kinetics and SoftVest for not voting as recommended by management. So what the investors group was saying is that right in the bylaws or wherever that clause is, that they don't have to vote on it because it's extraordinary circumstances or whatever that was. And you could see they held a vote in 37%, and it's because they didn't vote. The investors group, the proposition would have succeeded if they were forced to vote. And so they're still waiting for the ruling as of today from the Delaware court. And then recently there was a surprise as there was a board refreshment and a cooperation agreement from the management, which might be the beginning of the end to this long management battle. And look at the court fees that management spent $26.78 million during the first half of this year and $2.8 million the same period last year in 2022. And it was even more for Horizon Kinetics and SoftVest. And they had to pay other defense expenses and et cetera, et cetera. And the new agreement terminates the original stockholders' agreement and states that the two chairs, those old-timers, Barry and Norris, will retire from the board and be substituted by new independent members, or one's a woman and the other one's a man. And that guy from SoftVest, Mr. Oliver, will remain on the board. And the author goes on to say even the management hasn't ceased a lawsuit, and in case that proposal is approved, they would have to be careful not to upset that guy at SoftVest. And the board meeting would happen in 2023 before the end of the year, and they'll be free to vote. So you know they'll vote no. And this agreement is an important step towards better governance and value creation for shareholders, so things could get better. It's not over yet, but it sounds like those two old-timers are kind of giving up there. And then the author goes on to describe their new business model. This is a really great article. If you can see this, just pause it, you can see everything that they're doing. Surface procurement, so land, water, operating and drilling, etc., etc. They're really a big corporation, got a lot of stuff going on between the water and the oil and gas. So my take from it is if SoftVest wins, or that guy Oliver, there won't be a stock split. And if this skyrockets past this TDST, gets it qualified and confirmed and keeps moving up, I don't know, the sky's the limit. Last time it went up to about 2,700 up here. Yeah, 2,700. It could go beyond that.